What's up, guys? Welcome to the DoItMovement podcast. This is your host, Martine Jackson, and I've built my 6-figure, soon-to-be 7-figure, massive real estate business through commercial investing, rental investing, and wholesaling in Virginia. After college, I worked a series of jobs that I absolutely hated and decided to take life into my own hands. What my journey has shown me is one very important thing. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Each week, I bring you a powerful guest or tip to unravel the real estate game, and my challenge to you is that you take some of that knowledge and do something with it. The Do It Movement is here to help you create the life you desire through real estate. Now let's get to it. Hello today, Do It Movement listeners. This is your host, Martine Jackson. Today we have the Vernon Vaughan. How you doing, man?
What's happening? I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here, man. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. I'm excited to have you on this podcast because I know that you're going to bring it for the people today. You're going to give us all sorts of nuggets that people that are driving, listening to the podcast, they're probably going to have to pull over today because they don't need to write these notes down.
I'm going to do my best to give them nuggets, man.
Okay. But for the people that may not know who you are, just share your story. Why'd you get into real estate?
I just, so I got back into real estate way back in like 2003, man. So that seems like forever ago. I think
I was in middle school.
See, look at that. But what really made me want to get into investing was the ability to make money. I mean, let's just keep it real. I'm gonna keep it very.
Right.
I'm not gonna make it romantic. It was the ability to make money without having to necessarily do a ton of transactions. Before getting into real estate, my prior business was I started a cleaning company. Right. I was working in corporate America, and I was a salaried professional. And I was working so long and working so late that I knew it was time to finally go home every night when the cleaning crew came in, right?
Right.
But those late nights working at the office, I kind of became friends with the cleaners and had an idea of starting a cleaning company. And we made good money, but it was, a lot of transactions. Like it was thousands of transactions to make 6 figures. And the thing I liked about real estate was the ability to, these days you can make 6 figures in one transaction. So I love the idea of a business where you can do well without having to have a volume business. I mean, you can certainly do a volume business if you want to, but it doesn't require you to do so. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to the business. And then once you get into it, you come to find out there's so many other benefits and so many great things about the business. One thing I love about the business now is that it's equally satisfying to your left side and your right side of the brain, right? It's equally satisfying from a standpoint of aesthetics, right? In my business, we get to rehab and build beautiful properties. So you get to see those great before and after shots. But then also, if you do it right, you also have a gorgeous bottom line that's satisfying to the part of the brain that's stimulated by numbers. So it's definitely done in the business for everybody.
Right. Okay. Well, that's awesome. So I know you build a lot. I believe you rehab as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. When do you know when's a good time to build, and I guess when do you know like if you should just strictly be looking for rehabs?
Well, it's two very different products. So with in our new construction business, we go and we identify vacant lots, vacant infill lots, and an infill lot is an established subdivision where there are houses all around. It's like house, boom, no house.
Right.
And so we go for where there's no house. And for us, It's infill development is great because it takes a lot of the guesswork out. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There are utilities there, there's infrastructure there, there's demand for the product there. And it's just
Right.
up to you as the builder to kind of build the product that the end buyer wants. But infill development takes a lot of the guesswork and having to build in infrastructure. It removes it from the plate, and it's you just building a product that the end buyer is going to want. And
Right.
it's easier. A lot of people are scared of the idea of building something brand new. They think of everything that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we see where we can control the process a lot more, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that going into it, it's nothing there. It's a blank slate, and we can put a process in place. With the rehab, sometimes we're rehabbing a house that's 20 years old. Sometimes we're rehabbing a house that's 100 years old. Right. You never know what you're going to get. Even if you're rehabbing 200-year-old houses, one of them could have been renovated, 5 times over the last 100 years, and the other one touched once and done terribly. So even with renovation, sometimes you never know what you're going to get. And it is harder to kind of scale and process that, and put in a cookie cutter process on that side of the business, because each rehab really is the equivalent to a custom work of art.
Right. Yeah. Right. I kind of hear it unanimously from people that do new construction that new construction is easier, meaning that you don't really have all of those surprises that you would have in a rehab.
Correct. Once you get past the red tape, and not that rehabbing doesn't have red tape, because in my area, I'm in a DC market, and there's a lot of red tape. But once you get past the permitting and the time spent getting vertical, and new construction, it goes quick. In new construction, one thing that's different than rehabbing is, sometimes you've outlaid $40,000 or $50,000 before you've ever built anything. Right. And coming, as a rehabber, that was hard for me to fathom that. Listen, I've given you $50,000 in between permits and drawings and impact fees and studies and et cetera. And now you give me back a little piece of paper saying, okay, you can build now. As a rehabber, $40,000, $50,000, it builds you something. New construction, it gets you permission to build, So it's very different from that standpoint.
Right. So let's talk about that. For people that are interested in building or interested in maybe wholesaling to a builder, what are you looking for in terms of, I know you said infill lots, but how do you know it's a good deal?
So once again, back to the advantage of infill for us as a builder, as a buyer. So when we're analyzing deals, an infill lot helps us, number one, to quickly get to the point where we've got a good idea that it's even buildable. And that's key, because due diligence is important. And with lots, some lots you pursue or put under contract aren't going to be buildable. Like we've got a lot that we put under contract that's probably falling out of contract due to zoning. But just getting to the position where you can reasonably say, okay, this should be buildable. The faster you can get to that conclusion, and the less you can have to spend, less money and less time you can spend on due diligence, helps a lot. Because there have been lots where we spent thousands of dollars in due diligence only to find out it's not buildable. Now that doesn't sound, that doesn't sound, very fun to do at all. But, even less fun would have been buying a lot and then finding out it's not buildable. So I'll take spending, $2,000 all day to find out it's not buildable, as opposed to spending $150,000 and then spending $2,000 and find out it's not buildable. But infill is once again, it helps us get to that point a lot faster, because we can take a look. We can take a look at the neighborhood, and we can see we can see a lot. For instance, we can compare lot sizes. Like we know for different zoning types how large a lot needs to be. So for some infill development, which are already lots that are already recorded, sometimes they're already grandfathered in. So you know that you can build by right. And anytime you can build by right, meaning you don't really have to get permission to build, is better as opposed to having to go through a variance or having to go through a hearing to where you've got to ask permission or ask them to make an exception to allow you to build. That's not favorable. I mean, it can be done, but once again, you're going to spend money on zoning attorneys. It's going to take you time to do. And in real estate, doesn't matter what you're doing. Doesn't matter if it's rehabbing or new building. Your ability to be agile is super important. You don't want to be stuck in things that don't allow you to pivot when you need to, or things that just have a very long horizon. That's not a favorable position to be in.
Right. So I have a question for you. When you're doing your due diligence to see if it's buildable, what exactly are you looking for? Who are you getting to help you to check to see if, I can build on this lot? Right.
So probably one of the first things we do is we take a look at the lot in our county's GIS system, right?
Okay.
And the GIS system is going to show you the lot. It's going to allow you to see, the plat, allow you to see a satellite photo. It's going to allow you to see the zoning type, to look at the measurements of the lot, the dimensions of the lot. And so the very first thing we look to see is, okay, is this lot something that we can put our desired end product on, right? Some lots may have a funny shape to it, to where in order to build on it, you've got to put the house at an awkward angle. To build on it, you've got to build behind another house. So imagine, when you open the front door, the first thing you see is the back of another house.
Right.
Once again, not the best thing to do. So that's the first thing we look at and see is like, okay, is it something we think we can build on, the type of house we want to build on, and that buyers would like? And sometimes that answer off the top is no. Not meaning it's not buildable. It just means that for us, it doesn't, there are better lots to be had out there.
Right.
Second thing we do is we do then, drill down to those lot dimensions. Can we, is it a super narrow lot? Once again, is it going to affect the placement of the house? But ultimately, before we may put a property under contract, but one of the very first things we do in our due diligence is we reach out to our surveyors, and our surveyors are going to go out and confirm that what is on paper, what we think we see, is in fact true. Sometimes,
right? So you don't get the slither like that dude that bought at the auction. You heard that story?
Yeah,
he thought he was buying a house and he got the slither lane.
He showed a picture and he thought it was a house, and it was that little strip in two townhouses. Right. Right. And so your surveyor, because here's one thing about infill development, right? It's like I say, we look for where there's house, and then we build where there's no house. But the smart person has to ask themselves, like, well, look, how come there's no house here? Right? Why is there? Sometimes it's a perfectly good reason. Sometimes the house was demolished. Sometimes, especially in high density areas, there was never a house there. It was just somebody who had two lots. And for years, they enjoyed having a yard that was just bigger than their neighbors. But one day, they found out, hey, this extra yard is worth $50,000. They're like, I like grass, but not that much. I'm gonna sell it and get $50,000, right? Right. They have a Corvette than more grass, and that's sometimes that's why people haven't built on it. But you do want to ask yourself, why hasn't it been built on? Sometimes you know that answer. Sometimes sellers will say one thing and it's not the truth. Surprise there, right? But we depend on our surveyors to keep us out of trouble. I remember a couple of years ago, we put a contract on 3 lots in an established neighborhood side by side, and we thought we were getting a great deal. And within 24 hours, our surveyor said, well, two issues. Number one, there's a paper road that goes through this lot. And a paper road is a road that was recorded and never built on. And it was never built. And just because it's not built today doesn't mean it can't be built tomorrow. And so the last thing you want to do is build a house where there's a road that could be built out one day. And our surveyors also quickly let us know also half of the lot is wetlands, and you can't build them. So once again, things you wouldn't see, things that you would think that a seller would disclose, they did not.
Right.
And the funny thing about that lot was, after we released it from contract, the sellers put it right back on a multiple listing system. And it was like, once again, you think that they would let you know, but
they just went back to it. So you got a surveyor looking at it.
Absolutely.
You're thinking, well, why isn't something here? Is there anything else that you're doing in due diligence?
Yeah, and then we also do soil testing.
Okay.
So we do because what happens is, soil test is number one going to help you to make sure that the type of foundation you're going to build is compatible with that lot, and if you could expect any surprises. Also, anytime you have something where maybe there used to be a house and it was demolished, you got to make sure that they didn't just dig a hole in the ground and dump the old house into that hole and fill it back. Because you are going to run into issues, environmental issues, and also trying to build on that lot.
Right.
One of the first professionals that we engage, and kind of along that same step, once we find out we know it's buildable, then we start to consult with our architect, right? Because we want to make sure that once again we can put the product on a lot that is gonna hit that sweet spot. That's gonna get us the most amount of money, right? Because you don't want to underbuild, nor do you want to overbuild. So you got to kind of architect to make sure they help you get to the sweet spot.
Right. Have you ever had a plot of land where it was like on a very steep incline? Does that add any extra expenses?
It does. So I ideally, like, the ideal lot is one that's flat with a moderate grade, and that's rectangle shape, right? And like, we've been fortunate that a lot of lots we buy are mostly flat, like one or two trees, right? Sidewalk already there. I mean, it keeps it super, super simple. And so sometimes, when people bring us lots, we see them and there are steep inclines or declines, and you can deal with them. I mean, you can for the right amount of money you can build anything,
right?
But, it does add challenges, it does add cost. Also, as builders, different from a rehab. With the rehab, once you're done and it's sold, for the most part you're done. As builders, we have to warranty what we build. And so last thing we want to do is, like, we've got one project we sold last year where the lot is flat, but as a matter of fact, it's too flat, right? It holds water. And so we're still, as builders, we're still got to deal with and warranty kind of ongoing water issues. So as a builder, we're quickly learning things to do and things not to do to make our life easier down the road. Because once again, if we sell it today, that doesn't mean we're done. That means we still have at least another year to warranty that product. So we want to make sure that, we not only build something that looks beautiful, but that, is satisfying for the person that lives in it and doesn't cause ongoing headaches.
Right. Okay. So I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, like, let's say someone was trying to wholesale a lot to you. What, I guess, as far as numbers, we looked at the due diligence, we found out that it's buildable, you got your architect looking at it, but as far as numbers, where does it need to be in the spectrum of things, as far as like what the houses are selling for, anything in that area, for you to even consider going through all the trouble of doing the due diligence? Right.
Well, you know what? I mean, to keep it simple. So, for instance, on our rehabs, ideally we try to buy at 70% of ARV. And our new construction is like, it's no different because, I look at it like this. I'm not going to build a house just for the sake of Facebook likes and Instagram likes. Like, it's got to make
you got to get paid.
It's got to be profitable. Building a house, from the day we buy the dirt to the day we sell the finished product is typically going to take, easily twice as long as a rehab. And so it's got to be profitable. So we just, at the end of the day, we run it through the same numbers, like, okay, we're paying this much for the dirt. Here's how much we think our construction costs are. And here's the ARV, are we still getting it at 70% or, maybe sometimes up to 72 or 73% of ARV? Does it still make sense? Because if we do all that and we find out where we're buying it at 80% of ARV, then I'll be like, don't do it.
Right.
I love building houses. I love rehabbing houses. I wouldn't do either one for free. I love it. Right. There are easier hobbies out there if you're looking for a hobby.
Right.
So what we do, but that's what we do. Ultimately, at the end of the day, or very early on, we look at like, okay, what do we think we can sell it for? We're getting dialed into what our construction costs are. So we're getting pretty good at knowing what that's going to be. And then we know how much they're asking for the lot. And from there, we kind of reverse engineer like, okay, does it make money at their asking price? If it doesn't, here's what we need to get the house for.
Right.
Here's what we need to get the lot for in order for it to make sense. And if we can't, then we don't.
So I'm sure that, like labor costs in terms of building is different in different areas, but because you're in the DC market, so you're in a higher end market.
Absolutely.
And
y'all are in Richmond. Y'all are 90 minutes away. I know my man, Chris Jefferson. I know when he was building, I know his costs were significantly less than ours. Significant. And my guess is if you go further up north from me, they probably get higher. Right. So do y'all have a certain amount that's the price per square foot for building costs, or is it more so that I know that, the foundation is going to cost this, and I know, okay. So the best way, for us, the best way to go about determining construction costs is line by line. And there can be hundreds of line items, but that is, and what we're doing now is we kind of build up based on historical data. So what we've spent on this project and this, and we go line by line. And at the end of the day, we come up with what we project we'll spend. And then we track in the project what we've actually spent. And we know if we're kind of on track, if we're above or below. Because one example is, and probably, when it comes to when people hear we do new construction, probably one of the most questions we're asked most often is, like, what's the average rate per square foot? And number one, it's a loaded question because it just depends on, because to come up with that, essentially you're taking your cost of construction and then just dividing it by how many square feet you built, right? Well, all right. So for instance, in our area, when we're in Maryland, Prince George's County, right outside of DC, depending on where we build, we have to pay these things called impact fees. And an impact fee is more or less a tax that's payable to the school system and to emergency response, right? Think fire, police. If we're outside of the Beltway, that cost is like almost $35,000, I think, right?
Yeah,
and
you told me that before.
right. If we're inside the Beltway, it's like $11,000. And so if you say, well, how much does it cost to build per square foot? Well, that's a hard cost that we put into our total construction costs. Some people, some counties, close to us, don't have any impact fees at all. So so if you ask two people what's your cost per square foot to build, you can get two very different reasons. I mean, I'm sorry, two very different amounts, just based on what type of permit fees or type of builder taxes or whatever they have to pay. So, and another thing we learned on our first new construction project, that we did a roofing system, roof truss system, because of the way we designed the house. That roof truss system probably cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of about, I think the number was like $12,000 or $13,000 instead of more like $8,000. Now, if you say, well, how much do you spend per square foot to build a house? That house was like a 2,000 square foot house. Somebody could have built a house next door, also 2,000 square feet. And because their roofing system was less complicated, they will have a lower cost per square foot to build. Per square foot just really takes into length and width. It doesn't take into all of the other dimensions and things that go into building a house. It just doesn't. So now if you want to, you could build a house and you could look at your cost, and then and only then you could say, well, if we want to look at it on a per square foot basis, this is what we spent. But just know, if you go and build a new floor plan, that number probably is going to kind of go right out the window based on what you do to the house.
So the stuff that you're building, are you building like a cookie cutter, the same house every time, or are you building different houses depending on where they are?
So far, we built different houses. Now and as soon as possible, we want to get to the point where we're building cookie cutter. Right. And, look, it doesn't sound exciting or sexy because, like, man, no, each house should be one off. And you understand why builders do and don't do certain things from a cost standpoint. Also, as I mentioned, from the standpoint of being able to warranty the product, like you don't want to build things that are going to break or that are going to have high failure rates. But also by building a floor plan, or at least a similar floor plan, it falls back into your historical data when it comes to cost. You can start to get very predictable about, okay, this is what it should cost. Also, you get to improve the product over time. So if you build the same thing, you start to say like, okay, on a last project, this is something I would have done better. This is something I would have done different. This is something I would have left out altogether. Here's room for improvement. And you get a chance to improve on that floor plan, both from a standpoint of cost and the quality of the end product when you build the same thing. When you start from scratch every single time, it can be done, but you definitely lose some efficiency.
Right. Yeah, I know a couple people that they do the cookie cutter approach. It seems like it's I don't know if it's more profitable, but it seems like it because they know exactly how much they're going to spend because they've done it so many times. And I know you don't want to answer this question, but I've heard from the spectrum of people paying price per square foot for construction. Some I heard as low as $85 per square foot, which I think that's pretty low. Right. And then I've heard other people say like $100 a square foot, but I guess it just depends. Yeah. I'm assuming in DC it's probably
our costs
astronomically higher.
Right. So our costs have definitely trended closer to $100,000. Like so our last project we finished and sold, I guess at about 2 weeks ago, was 2,400 square feet total, and I think will probably come in right around $310,000. Now, and that's everything from foundation to porta potties to dumpsters to impact fees. I mentioned like that's we don't leave anything out. If we take on the cost strictly for the purpose of building that house, it goes into our budget. It's no such thing because and that's the other thing when it comes to per square foot, some people will only go to hard construction costs, right? Like nails, lumber, labor, and like they'll start to leave out stuff like porta potties. Guess what? Porta potty is required. It's not optional. Dumpsters are required. Those permit fees to even get to the point where you're building that house are required. So if it's not optional, then it, if it's something that we have to do, then it goes into that budget.
Yeah, I think that's a smart approach to do because that's how much you're going to spend. So it kind of gives you a better idea of where you are with things. I had a question for you. I'm trying to remember what it was. This is a very good conversation for me, by the way.
Thank you. I try my best.
But I guess, this is what I was going to ask you. You may not have to deal with this as much because of your market, things being more higher price and things of that nature. But the reason I was kind of emphasizing the price per square foot stuff is because I guess I wanted to get you to talk about when is it worth building? Because like if things aren't selling for over what your build costs are, maybe you shouldn't build over there.
True. I mean, so, right. So that's, and look, we take a look at, in our market, we've identified there are a relative few areas we can build in and make it worthwhile, right? It's because, once again, our cost to build isn't cheap. We already mentioned that depending on where we're building, we have these things called impact fees. And so sometimes, and impact fees and different taxes and permits, sometimes they're done, in the name of affordable housing, but sometimes it makes it impossible for builders to build affordable housing. Like we build, we focus on building products where the where the sale price is close to $600,000. That's a lot of money,
right?
In DC, that's a lot of money, and they're not and they're not huge houses, right? I mean, so we're typically building about 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, for about $600K and higher. So that's a lot of money, and and like I say, so it's and it can be difficult to make a worthwhile profit building houses and building smaller houses or building houses in areas where the ARV is maybe $350,000, right? Right. For instance, if you're building in a neighborhood that's $350,000 and you already know before you ever pay for anything, before you even buy the lot, you already know you got to pay impact fee of $30K. That's like 10%. That's 10% of the ARV gone right there. Before you've ever paid for the land, before you've ever had closing costs, before you've ever hired an architect, ever put up anything at all, $30K gone already. And so that can be a challenge. Some, and some builders find a way to overcome that. And some builders say like, okay, I'm okay building this house and maybe having a net profit of $30,000. I mean, so, it's just to each their own. But for us, it has to be worthwhile because for us, it's going to be a venture that takes, better part of a year. We're going to put our all into it. All right. I mean, we take it seriously. We very much want to build a product that we don't do it for the Facebook likes, but we don't. You know what I'm saying? Right. But we very much want to build a product that we're happy having our name on it, right?
Okay, well that's awesome.
So to do that, it's got to be worthwhile.
Right, because you're like, this is not a hobby. You got to make some money.
Not a hobby, right. So that has to be something that motivates you and keeps you in a day-to-day operation, in the trenches, dealing with the contractors, dealing with the inspectors and all that stuff.
Right. Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge on this. This has been very informative. What are some books that, you may have read or you're reading now that, you think are worth mentioning?
Yeah. It's, so, I mean, probably a book I read, that's the same book that everybody read. I mean, was Dad, Poor Dad. And that one was really all about mindset. It's not an overly technical book, but it's just mindset, right? It just puts you in a mindset of the ability to create wealth or to create profit. Some of the other books, one of the other books I read recently was a book called Building Atlanta. Book about a gentleman who who was in a construction business in segregation era South, right? So like I know we go through red tape and headaches here, but like if a black man can build, in Atlanta and in the South in the segregation era, I'm like, man, what I'm going through ain't nothing,
right? It ain't that bad.
Ain't nothing. Like one of his first, this guy went from in the book, it's the guy's name is Herman J. Russell. I think he passed away a few years ago, but he went from owning a shoe shine stand to deciding he was going to build a house, and the first thing he built was a property that he was going to rent out, and then he found out he built it on the wrong lot.
That seems like a really good book. I'm about to check that out.
Once again, it's about, it was also, he talks about how when he wanted to buy land and do deals in some of these small southern towns and cities, that he had to have somebody be a figurehead for him, right? He couldn't be the face of the company as an African American. So he had to have a white person be the face of his company. Because otherwise they wouldn't have sold to him or dealt with him had they known he was black. So once again, it just gives you, it's about mindset, right? It helps you because building, whether you're rehabbing, whether you're wholesaling, we do it to make money, but that's not what it's about. So what it's about at its core is kind of solving a problem. Right. And then only once you solve that problem do you get the money. Right. So building is, for instance, building is here. It's a lot with nothing. Right. Turn it into a useful product that people desire. As rehab, here's a property that's seen better days, add value to it, make it functional, bring it up to today's standards, make it something that people want. As a wholesaler, like, look, here's a seller who has issues, match them up with the buyer who wants the end product. And so that's how we get rewarded, is by solving problems. Yep.
Right. Okay. Well, is there any advice that you'd like to give any of the listeners that, you wish you would have known when you first started out?
Well, one thing I would definitely say is if you decide it's something you want to do, you gotta kind of live, eat, sleep, and breathe it. All right. Because it's, in our business, there are a lot of people who want it bad. Right. And so it's something you can't fake. So if you come into the business and you're like, I want the money, but I don't want to go through all that other stuff. Or it seems like it's fun to do or sexy to do. And I'll get the Facebook likes. None of that stuff is gonna give you enough fuel to help you persevere when you go through challenges. And our business really is about finding problems. It was finding challenges. And so if you're not willing to go through the 9 no's to get to 1 yes, you won't do it. So you can't fake the dedication to it. Second thing I would say would be instead of asking what's the best investment type, that's probably one of the most common questions that I'm sure we both hear.
Right.
It's like, rephrase it and tell the person you're asking the question to, tell them about you, tell them about your goals, and then ask them, in your opinion, what might be the best investment type for me.
Right.
In this business, like, everything works, right? Every investment type works. Every marketing type works. The question is, does it work for you?
Right.
Sometimes the answer is no. Right. Sooner you get to that realization, the better off you'll be. Right. The sooner you eliminate or know what's not for you, the sooner you'll find what it is for you.
Right. That's great. That's great that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people miss that point. It's like, what is your end goal? What's your exit strategy? Because then we can tell you the path to get there. But if you're just like, well, which one is the best one? Who knows? You have to say that for yourself, because my goal may be different from your goal.
Absolutely.
So that's amazing advice.
It is easier to, it's easier to build your business around your goals than to build a business and come to the realization that it doesn't fit within your goals and to have to try to unwind or to go back and re-engineer. It's easier to identify from the beginning and tailor your business to that way. And it's not something that is talked about or discussed much. Because right now, man, social media glorifies the grind. And the grind is 15-hour days, 20-hour days, 24-hour days, finding the 25th hour out of the day. And I'm not saying you're not going to have those types of days, but if that's what you go out looking for, that's what you're going to find.
Right.
You're going to find those 20-hour days. And then when you decide you don't want to do them no more, you're going to have to do some re-engineering. So it's better not to start down that path anyway,
Right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast today. You gave us some really good insight, really good advice. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we end it?
No, just just once again, if you want to do it, you got to be dedicated. You got to be dedicated. And it's a lot of people out there willing to help you. A lot of great resources out there.
Right.
But most important, the thing you got to have the most, even more than money or anything else, is like you got to have a dedication.
Right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate it. Share some great tips. But until next time, Do It Movement listeners, see ya.
See ya. Do It Movement.
Thanks, guys, for checking out the Do It Movement podcast this week. I hope we inspired you to make some power moves now. If you haven't already, make sure you follow us for more info on our guests and new episodes at DoItMovementPod on Instagram and at DoItMovementPod.com. Make sure as you apply some of this knowledge, you tag us along the way by adding #DoItMovement so that we can recognize the change makers. See you next week.